Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session. Myself, Himendra, and my co-moderator Jinesh. We are given the task of moderating this session. So welcome to all of you. So what I want to start with is by release of a report which Mentera has prepared along with Pro. Mukesh is here from Mentera, and I'll request him to take on from here.
Thanks, Himendra. Thanks everyone. Before we release the report, I'll talk about a couple of people who have been really behind this report. So my colleague Chakravarti. Chakra has led the effort on this report. He's one of the few farmer investors. A person who is farmer by background, farmer by inclination, has studied agriculture and has been doing incubation and investing in agriculture for the last 8-10 years. For all the old timers, I think Paul Besson, founder of Wilbur, needs no introduction. Inspired by work of Dr. Varghese Kurian, he committed to in fact investing much early in his career, and one of the most committed ecosystem builders I have really come across. So both Paul and Chakra, if you can come here, and Mr. Rewari, if you can do the honors please of delivering the agri report. And you've been involved in many initiatives, advising many initiatives of the government to build the domestic industry here. So
yeah, we do got to keep it this way.
So I'm the last minute replacement. I didn't know I was supposed to release the report, and whatever I speak will be just what's called off the cuff. And when Paul says I should release the report, I can't say no because I'm working with him on that, what's it called, the TDB? DST? Invent program with DFID TDB, where we are supporting incubators for projects in the underserved areas, and agriculture is one of them. And then of course I'm also helping, I just thought I'd do a bit of my publicity. I'm helping NABARD set up a subsidiary for the agriculture sector because we found there's a major gap in that sector, and since I set up CP Venture, they said, why don't you help us and set up a subsidiary which is dedicated to the food and agro sector, and then they're doing the fund of funds. Now there are what about multiple agencies which are working in this sector, starting from DFID, Windows helping them, NABARD, both as a fund of funds and the new subsidiary, and SIDBI has both a subsidiary and a fund of funds activity. There's Indo-US Tech Endowment Fund, which is giving grant for agriculture projects, food projects which have a social impact. There's a BIRAC, new initiative fund of funds. I'm helping them set that up, which includes both biotech and agro. So there are enough opportunities. The challenge in India is one, that we don't have those success stories, and that I think what drives whether it's impact or venture capital, and you've seen that in the whole internet space, that you have a few success stories, the source then becomes easy. And then of course there are a host of other complications on regulation. So this report I think is timely. I just had a quick look at it, and thanks to both Mentera and IIC to come up with it. I think now you start working on the entrepreneurs and bring out some more success stories. Thanks.
So thank you, sir.
I can move. Thanks.
Before I hand over the floor back to Jinesh and Himendra, I just want to talk about a couple of major things that we have covered in this report. So while we were doing this report, everybody talks about Israel and success of Israel, despite being a country which did not have a very favorable environment or availability of water. How did they do so much invention? We're looking at it, and the amount of funding that has gone into Israel is 10 times of Bangalore. So that was very surprising. In agriculture, focus on agriculture. So the market in India is much bigger. We can create almost 10 clusters which are of the size of Israel or probably bigger in India, because the market is there, talent is there, ecosystem is there, and that will require a lot of resources, that will require a lot of collaboration across different stakeholders. Mr. Rewari already talked about many initiatives from the government, and there are fund managers here. So I'll let Jinesh and Hemendra take it over from here and then talk about the challenges and how do we overcome this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mukesh. Guys, let's sit here. On the topic, right, we're trying to figure out, this is going to be a roundtable discussion where everyone has a need or a chance to contribute to the topic, right? We just don't want to make it like one-way discussions from our side to people. We're trying to delve into a major issue, looking at the report what Mentor released. What we realize that in spite of all the UN cry and noise what we create in the agri ecosystem, the agri ecosystem in India has probably reached $150 million of investment money in this sector, and that too after so much of UN cry. And we are most of the fund investors, most of the investors who are investing are present in the room, right? And we still don't know how we're going to resolve the problem and figure out a way to get more and more capital. The intent of the discussion is to figure out, to lay down or figure out the problems what we have and how we can take it forward from this point.
Thanks, Dinesh. So clearly, I think we want to make this session as interactive as possible. Just to put some sort of structure behind it, we hear so much about innovations in agriculture, trying to solve so many problems. But at a very overall level, you look at the stakeholders who are in the system, the investors, the corporates, the policymakers, and the startups, right? So my question to whosoever is present from any of these groups, when we talk about, for example, doubling farmer income, and there's so much emphasis on building towards farmer welfare, why don't we see the public ecosystem lagging so much? If you look at the investment, public investment in agriculture is not going up. So there's a big question: how do we get to a situation where we can realistically target increasing farmer income, forget doubling farmer income? If you look at corporates, most of the corporates we talk to, they realize that the innovations are not going to come from within the system. But when it comes to working with innovators, I still see this some sort of hesitation or lack of trust. That's why we don't see sort of a real good partnerships happening between corporates and early stage companies. And that's, to compare with the US ecosystem, it's very different. Most of the startups have scaled on the back of large food and agri companies. And so for investors, so as Dinesh said, anyone who's present in this room, Ankur, Wilgrow, Omniva, myself, we've been investing for last 8 to 10 years, but the collective investment, innovations part, the AgTech part, still $150 million across 60 odd deals. The sector, which is almost $400 billion and one of the largest, one of the most important sector of the economy. And if you compare it as percentage of the total BCP money which has come into the country, it's probably a percentage point. So there are a lot of issues around it. I think the whole idea is to open up the discussion and get your views, what you think about it. Maybe we can go around the room, or so you can introduce yourself, and if you have any thoughts around it, then we.
Let's make it 60 seconds to
So my name is Pankaj. I represent Zephyr Peacock Funds. We also invest in food and agriculture. We have food and agriculture investments in India and Africa. We have a fund in Sri Lanka which will also make some food and agri investments in the future. From our perspective, we till date invested in 2 ventures in India. One of them is listed here, which is a potato seeds company by the name of Cultivars. We see food and agri, so while it's a large opportunity from an LP perspective, when we try and raise funds for food and agri ventures, because we invest in food and agri ventures in India, the first question is the availability of debt capital as well for small and medium enterprises in this sector, and we see that to be a big challenge. The second, which we are ourselves realizing since we've invested in a seeds company, some of these businesses have long gestation cycles, and our ability to remain invested as a private equity fund is restricted to 4 to 6 years. So we have not been able to participate in many food and agri businesses where we cannot find an exit. Third, the sophistication that food and agricultural entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of gap between what the market needs from an investment perspective and how entrepreneur who's running an SME in the food and agriculture space approaches the private equity enterprise. So that's also a challenge that we see. We have ourselves tried to innovate and groom entrepreneurs in the food and agri space. So in one particular case, we've identified a CEO, brought in place, and trained and groomed the CEO to run a food and agri enterprise. And we see that as one part of the solution. It takes a lot of our bandwidth and time, and also financial resources. But I think there are other stakeholders who have a major role to play in this larger ecosystem where they can work with private equity enterprises, private equity funds, and food and agri enterprises and help us build the industry in India.
I'm Gaurav from Ananya Finance. Our limited experience has been in agri has been to finance farmer producer companies to reach out to small market farmers. We have done about 300 loans to about 60 FPOs across 11 states. I think it is more a question of it is more about perception. We actually still struggle to raise debt, though we ourselves have a very strong balance sheet. But we struggle to raise debt for lending to FPOs, despite loans to FPOs qualifying for PSL and under SFMF category, as a matter of fact. But I think the perception that because of farm-owned waivers, agriculture being a high-risk sector, especially in the case of small margin farmers, and with high delinquencies of banks' own portfolios on KCCs, etc. I think that probably is the reason why debt capital doesn't readily flow into the sector. Equity, we ourselves wanted to raise equity for our company, and we got an overwhelming response from GPs. But because we had a very small agri portfolio, we couldn't really close the deal. But otherwise, I think equity there is willingness. So I think debt is a problem. If debt we can raise, then I think that should attract more equity as well.
Sure. Hi, I'm Raghav from Asha Impact. We are one of the suspects, I would say, who have not contributed to raising that overall pool of investment in the sector, even though we've been looking at agri for the last year. For a sector agnostic investment platform like ourselves, the biggest challenge is when you compare the opportunity cost and risk appetite associated with agri investing compared to FSI as a sector, it becomes hard for you to make and take on that risk as a newcomer to the sector. And the second point is when you're underwriting an operating play in agriculture, it's intuitively different from underwriting any other sector, right? If you're talking about mobile technology, if you're talking about FSI, it's something you interact with as a GP, as an associate on a regular basis in your own life. You do not interact with the farmer, you do not interact with the risk appetite of what it takes or what it even means to have visibility into working capital in the long run. So both making an impact argument for contract farming, for example, that might not have an absolute increase in income, and as well as underwriting the extra risk you might have to absorb if you're looking at the sector have been an issue for us.
My name is Andreas Nilsson. I'm from Sonans, a private equity fund of funds. We're fairly new, investing into impact-focused private equity funds in emerging markets with an impact perspective. I think, so we're also sector agnostic. We also invest outside India. I think when it comes to agriculture, the concept of success stories is really extremely important, because when you think about financial services, you think about lots of companies that are listed today, or fintech companies that are conquering the world. That is still lacking in agriculture. From our specific view, we will be investing into agriculture. We do believe in it. When it comes to the broader investor base, or mainstream investors that we are targeting in Europe, it will be much easier if there are success stories. But even then, as most people in the room know, even if you have a great product and it is proven and there are opportunities, based on its merits, it still doesn't sell itself. It needs a lot of convincing to do it. So there are two parts to it. One is to have the almost proof that it works, and then you can start working really hard to sell that. So it's a lot of work, but I think it's definitely, and I think I consider this to be early days still, so I see huge potential.
Can you ask what do you mean by success stories? Or what is a success in a agri-tech startup?
Even so, companies, but also funds having established themselves as successful investors into this, not just being one company that went public, or not even going public, but more transactions that are visible, later stage, as opposed to early stage, cool story.
So getting more follow-on money into early stage companies?
Sorry?
Getting more follow-on money? Or
Yes, follow on a B, C, D listing, or maybe global ad companies coming in, those kind of transactions that are more visible. Because I think everybody agrees, especially in this room, that there are lots of cool stories. The question is, transforming that into something more sustainable and larger.
Can I first be talking about the India context or the global context? Because there have been these examples. I mean, I'm going to start with Climate Corp, and there has been an example. So, are you talking specifically about the India context, or are you talking about the global context?
I was thinking about India, but I think it's well, India. I think India is very difficult. Different. India, Brazil is completely different. You have in India, it's very specific with the smallholder farmers you have here and challenges that you faced here, which is not necessarily the case in other countries. But even if you have a few, I think there needs to be like a more momentum for others. I mean, we're interested, but I see ourselves as niche players.
I am Pradyumna. I represent IP Global. IP Global is sort of building an ecosystem for blended finance solutions with nutrition as a target area. And I'm a sort of a beginner in the sector, but some of the limited learning that I have built, sort of resonates with most of the people here. As earlier mentioned, it is very difficult to find market-based solutions with disaggregated land holdings, and though there is a sort of traction in early-stage investments in technology-based models, we are really not seeing them achieve scale, mostly because of unwillingness to buy from the farmer ends and so on.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hakol Leon. I work at the Asian Development Bank, ADB, and I'm here from the Private Sector Operations Department. So there we have three main areas that invest or look at opportunities in agri. We have an agribusiness unit that started a couple of years back, and that's essentially what they do. Although most of their work has been mostly in China and Central Asia, not so much in this part of the world. We also have funds for this group that will invest in this kind of theme. And then where I work in the financial institutions department, where we'll work, I guess, through either a bank or financial cooperative or a farming cooperative. So those will be like our main approaches to the sector. Also, perhaps the rural development kind of angle. So essentially, we provide debt or guarantees, equity. That will be the kind of instrument that will come in through. And essentially, coming to a place like this, looking for opportunities, networkability, make contacts, and also looking forward to going through the report as well and learning more about the sector.
I'm Bharat Pandey. I'm at Omidyar Network. Omidyar Network currently doesn't invest in agri, but is a space that we are actively looking at. And as somebody who's followed the agri space from a little bit of a distance, one observation I had was that there seems to be a fair amount of, if I may use the word, pessimism about opportunities in this sector, especially if one compares it with sectors across the room, financial inclusion and various other spaces. And I was wondering if there is something we could do collectively or in partnership with government, etc., that may that may take the level of activity to the next level. And I would love to get reflection of the group on what that might be. One thing that Hemendra and I have been discussing for a while now is that is there a data play? Is there something we can do in terms of putting together a publicly available platform of data flows which could dramatically reduce the cost of or increase the opportunities available to businesses and startups to create business models that might be more attractive to investors and have higher probability of success and so on. So that's one theme that I thought one can sort of reflect on. I have done some work over the last year in my previous job with the government of Andhra Pradesh, which is actually doing some really exemplary work in trying to put together whatever data sets they have related to agriculture, soils, water availability, past yield data, etc. And then trying to use how we might use big data analysis techniques to create predictive nature of yields and forecasts that can then be used for different use cases. So I think there's definitely something there in terms of putting together different streams of data in a way that is a public good, somewhat inspired by the India stack, right? That could be helpful for this sector. But I would love to sort of get thoughts of others and open offer to work together with any of you who is interested in that over the next few months.
Thanks. Thierry, BNP Paribas, so we are a European bank. We are looking in India at some large project of chemical-free agriculture. And basically I'm here to listen and to learn from you essentially.
Hi everyone, this is what doesn't like me.
I think you can speak.
Is this working? Yeah, now it's working. I'm Aisha Gopal from Elevar Equity. You know, it's very interesting. At Elevar, we identified agri as a sector that needs that there is potential and it needs it can do with a lot of investment quite early on. But our first investment, Samunati, which was in the agri space, was only a couple of years back. And I think a lot of that is because there hasn't been enough talent coming into the space. I think talent has been a big issue, and now we are finally seeing more talent come into the space. So things are changing. Two of the biggest issues I would say that we see is it's very difficult to build a trust factor with the farmers, and I think that's a lot of that can be a big hurdle that a lot of companies face, and therefore it becomes very important to bring someone in from the industry who has worked with the farmers, and the farmers, you know, see this person or see this company as a trusted company, and they know that this company is here to stay and not go away. Because what happens is if a company dissolves a couple of years down and the farmer has to go back to the old methods, they kind of get orchestrated from the society, like, you know, you left us, good luck to you. So that I think building trust is a big challenge. The other thing that we see a lot is price discovery. It's just very difficult. I don't think anyone has really quite figured out how to do that at scale.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna from Challenger 88. We work with family offices, predominantly European and Australian families, and we help them get into investments in emerging markets through either equity or debt into startups or funds. We're sector agnostic, but agri is obviously a sector that cannot be ignored. So we've made an investment in Kennemer Foods International, which is based in Philippines. Cacao farming is the focus. So what they do is they work with farmers, organize them, link them to the market. I think market linkage being one of the core sectors that maybe all the agri investors look at. What our observation with this particular company has been, and would love to get everyone's thoughts on this, would be that just working with, like everyone highlighted, working with smallholder farmers it requires a lot of hand-holding and patience and capital. So it's taken longer than for this company to reach a certain point than what they had expected. So how can that be helped? The second piece is on the kind of capital that these companies attract. In the end, Kennemer is looking at splitting its model into a non-profit and a for-profit because the training piece did not work out as a for-profit. So is that something that, is that a theme that others are seeing, or do you still think that these kinds of companies can work as just a for-profit model? The third challenge that we've observed is, and I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on this, but in general, these companies seem to be at a lower margin, gross margin range. 15 to 20% would be the better companies. Is that sort of a theme that is observed overall? And if so, then when you're investing in such companies, how do you deal with that? I'd love to know thoughts around that. But I think I understand and echo the thought when people said that debt is difficult to come around. We have a couple of families that are interested in investing debt capital. The challenge has been that they're waiting for an equity round to come by and then back that up with debt capital. So how do we sort of make those two come together in an ideal world? Would be a good conversation to have as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Emmanuel and I'm from Caspian. Two thoughts I would initially talk about is, can we learn from some lessons from the dairy and the poultry sector in India, how they have modernized or scaled up and have become investable sectors. So are there lessons from there that we can take and look at in the other sectors where transformations haven't happened? The other thing about Caspian is there's lots of talk about debt, and we are one of the largest debt funders to companies that all these equity investors and funds have invested in. And we have enough resources to offer debt. But as we look at all these companies, a large number of them are not still debt ready. Basically, the dilemma we have, and I think the first check on that is, at a gross level, are they making money? If even that is not happening, we get scared we could kill a company with a debt rather than help it to grow.
We will have a lot of offline discussions after this.
So we need to, and if somebody can help us bring down the cost of debt, I think we have mechanisms to take care of the risks. Sure. So we basically have an appetite to do more in this sector. And one of the reasons, again, the lessons we learned is there are things that are needed to be done early in the company which are not addressed. Which, when we look at it from a debt perspective, we thought the investor would have done check on all these factors, which unfortunately were not done. With very, very preliminary things we saw, like even a GST registration being not there, balance sheets that have so many holes. So there are several issues that, if they can be addressed at an early stage, funding as debt can happen on a much larger scale, and we see that there's business and opportunity out there. On the scalability side, what we see, and because we have friends in the corporates like ITC, they are looking for scale, for volumes. So really they have to depend entirely on the intermediaries already in the trade. And the issue seems to be, again, the intermediaries are so deeply entrenched that the margins are illusory actually. The margins that is 30 or 35 or 50%, when companies start working practically, they're seeing that these are not really visible. So what I see, again, having worked with NDDB in the oilseed sector, where we worked at a very early stage when there was what I call the Teli Rajas. There were 6 families who controlled the whole edible oil economy of the country. So similarly, the kind of stranglehold on some of these commodities is invisible actually, and they extract value without doing anything. And to overcome those, you need scale. And our study in the edible oils really said that if you reach about 15% of market share, you could kind of dictate terms to the market. So you really need to get to those levels of volumes collectively, not one entity also, to be able to make a meaningful control on issues like prices and the supply chain. So we need to get there. The other point that I would like to make is that a lot of innovations are happening in sub-activities on the production, on the linkage, on the market. We need to combine all these things. Unless you develop a critical mass by integrating all these, viability of small farms is not going to happen. So basically, I think when we look again at the SDG goal of zero hunger, most of this hunger is in rural India, and to address that you need to make agriculture a profitable enterprise. And if you're going to do that, a lot of these pieces which we have all over the place need to be brought together, integrated and delivered on a single platform and in a way that it makes significant impact in focused areas. And if we can do that, probably there's a possibility to make a hell of a difference.
Sure.
It's only, I think, a matter of time, as I see, before this happens.
Your points are very valid. If you had solved all these problems, I don't think this conference would happen.
Yeah, maybe we are looking futuristic, but things are coming together.
If you can pass on the and give it to others, let's get doing it.
Hi, I'm Vijay from AIDEA. It's an agri-tech focused incubator accelerator of the Government of India. We run an accelerator called AgriUDAN. In fact, we have launched India's first accelerator in agribusiness. We have ran 2 accelerators so far. We help early stage startups for incubation and support scale-up stage startups for accelerator program. We are probably the agri-focused incubator, which is also actively into seed investments. We have supported so far 44 startups in the incubation accelerator programs. We've invested in 6 startups. In terms of investability, since the topic is around that, we have seen the world changing in the last 2 years. From investors not really keen on this sector to these kind of forums happening. There were days when the investments not coming in agri sector, but now I can say out of the 44 startups we supported, 12 startups got funded, which is like 23% of our cohort. Even in each of our accelerator, 30% of our cohorts get funded. And out of the 6 portfolios what we have invested, there are 2 startups which got Series A, one from Omnivore and also other from CQ Angels. We also are trying to figure out the debt space, which is becoming more crucial in the working capital space. But yes, we have credible partners like Wilbro to co-invest in startups in agriculture. We have few of our cohorts invested Bangalore Capital and more investors like Aspen are evaluating it. So in a way, being agri graduates who have been in this space, understanding agriculture and agribusiness professionals, and who very rarely entered into the incubation and in the investment space, I can very clearly say that this ecosystem is going in a very positive direction. But the challenge is working capital, the follow-on funding, and how to actually figure out a right business and scalable model.
Do you want to comment on the quality of entrepreneurs that you see over here?
Yes, the quality of entrepreneurs is very much increasing. In the last 3.5 years, I have seen 1,000 startups from idea to investment stage. Very mature startup could be around 350 to 500. But in terms of the quality of innovations, the curve has been just going from agri to the allied sectors, including fisheries, animal husbandry, and dairy. The quality of innovations is also, meagerly opened from IT or IoT-based startups or food-based startups to now high-end technology startups which are talking about AI, machine learning, robotics, these kind of stuff. And they are talking about use cases, blockchain for that matter. They are talking about use cases, they are making an early mover and trying to pilot it out. But definitely it's going in a very, very healthy manner, I can tell that.
I echo Vijay's view, right? As a fund, Omnivore also has seen a significant improvement on the quality of startups the last 8-9 years, right? We've been investing for nearly 8 years, and today in some of the first fund companies, we would not invest in the second fund, because the quality of options of entrepreneurs coming into the sector is probably increasing, right? And I think hopefully over a period of time, the issue of getting success stories would come out, because any sector would depend on the main entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur is good, I think they'll figure out getting a success story. We've seen some examples happening in the past, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we think it's going to be even a better time where you're seeing larger exits, and hopefully closer to unicorns, I think we'll see an exits coming out from the agri entrepreneurs. Guys, I mean, Sachin, you want to take part?
So I'm Sachin from Mix. For those of you who know Mix, Mix is a global data platform. It's a neutral organization and not for profit to create a transparency in the sector. Last 2 years we have started working on the agri-finance space and have a global partnership with Council on Smallholder Finance. This is 12 investor group, largest in agriculture with a total of $716 million of investments. They have presence in 64 countries and total of anywhere around average is 2.2 hectares of land for these small holder finance. These are 2.2 million farmers covered under that. For our experience from global market, we are trying to look at how we can set up the similar what Bharat you mentioned. We have created a concept note to create that level of transparency in India, where we appreciate to unlock new capital and to ensure that these are responsibly grown in the area. Our experience clearly says that when you start evaluating this level of a data, there is quite an over-concentration on one kind of a value chain actor. So if you look at producers and processors, 70% of the funding is going only to that group. But if you are talking of zero hunger, if you are talking of development of the entire sector, the entire value chain has to grow. So from input supplier to a distributor, if you look at the growth, these are negligible. So we are talking of what, $150 million here in India. I am pretty sure that it's also focused around the same area. While our experience on commodity side also, as we have heard from the interest on how much is in dairy product. So it's quite important that we look at from the commodity group point of view and also look at what is the debt to an equity, what's the growth and disbursement in over the period of time. So I'm looking forward to share more experience.
Hi, I'm Parag. I'm from the Acumen Fund. We have a new country strategy and now we'll be focused on agri and rural livelihood. And we focus on people below poverty line. So one of the areas which we are discussing is lots of innovation is going, but is it reaching the farmers with less than 1 acre land? That is one, we haven't seen many companies there. And also in the market linkages, can we add value and increase farmers' income who are running less than $1.9 per day? That's a key focus.
Hi, I'm Shruti. I work with Omnivore. I'm part of the investment team there. Omnivore, as you would have heard, is a food and agri-focused VC fund, and we invest very early into the life of the company. So typically in a seed to Series A stage. One of the challenges that we've seen has been with attracting follow-on capital for the sector, which I think all of us have voiced here. And some of it has also gotten to do with the articulation of the story itself. So when we list out challenges like long gestation periods, longer time to profitability, thin margins, these are all things that were true of the e-commerce sector as well. In fact, none of them is still making money. But the articulation of the story with respect to potential rather than pessimism around the challenges is what helped bring in a lot of deep-pocketed investors into the sector as well. And we're seeing that change. You have a lot of purely financial focused investors who started taking an interest in the sector. The presentation of the financial opportunity rather than just the social responsibility has also attracted an interesting quality of entrepreneurs into the space, and so we should see things evolving from here on.
I'm very happy that you said that the investors in Flipkart got their exit in 11 years.
Exactly, and it's still not making positive profits.
Yeah. So I think we'll get Ritu also into the discussion, one of the veterans in the sector.
I'm Ritu Verma from Ankur Capital. So we are an early stage fund. 70% of our portfolio, so roughly about 8 companies, is in the ag and food sector. So we invest across the chain from farming to all the way to food in our portfolio companies. So I have one thing for the group here, right? And I completely agree with Shruti here. I think we sit at a very interesting point in agriculture. And we need to change our narrative from talking about the fact that farmers will benefit. Farmers are businessmen. They are not beneficiaries. They are actually very smart. They know what to pay for. They know what not to pay for, and they do so. They do so very quickly. And we are the one country in the world that adopted BT cotton at a really, really fast pace, more than anybody else. And that goes to reflect that, when they see value, they pay. So I think we're sitting in an interesting opportunity for two reasons in India today. One is the fact that digital has never ever touched agriculture, and digital offers the opportunity for cost reduction, last mile delivery, access to small holdings which never actually happened before. And the second is the consumption story. And the fact I'm not only talking about consumption in India growing, but the consumption needs of the globe. And like it or not, India sits on a landmass and a biodiversity that has to be part of the world's food program here. And so how small farmers work and how small farmers are going to deliver to that consumption of the world is something that, I have no doubt that will happen and will happen here. And we've seen the winds of that change. So I think if we change our narrative to talk much more about, there is a very large opportunity here, right? And I think we tend to mix two kinds of businesses in agriculture. One that is much more equity, venture capital-like, and talking about cash flows in those companies and supporting them through debt is not appropriate. It hasn't been appropriate in the VC world, and we shouldn't quite be asking for that. And the second part of it are people who do trading plus or higher value kind of things, which are cash flow positive things and are akin to debt. So we start the narrative also, shifting and breaking the companies up into two different pieces here or three, and then talk about appropriate financing mechanisms. Then the issues of time scale, the issues of all of these other things will all sort of become much, much more clearer. And last but not the least, I think Mr. Ravi started off this conversation with the exact thing. I think we need a success here. Billion, half, 2 billion, whatever we want to do, and how can this room make it happen is something I think that would be good for us to chat
about. I tend to agree with what Ritu said, right? We need a change in narrative, right? And I think the biggest point, right, from what Mr. Devaraj started is about how do we get a big success story, right? And I think if we go to all find out reasons about why things are not happening, it will never happen, right? People need to really understand that a few sectors in agri which are very big, right? Horticulture has been growing in the last 8-9 years at a CAGR of 8-9%, which is humongous, right? Dairy sector, which is 4% of India's GDP, keeps on growing in double digits for the last many, many years, right? And India is still searching for more dairy product because the demand for milk is increasing and the existing supply might outstrip in the next few years. So opportunities are there, and these sectors are remunerative, it's cash flow positive. I think it's all about figuring out what you really want to do, right? I just want to quote about Stellabs Technologies, one of my portfolio companies in dairy sector. For the first 3 years, it's a typical VC company, 0 revenues, right? And we were worried about how I'm going to get my revenues, right? Then the year 4, they started selling some revenues. Year 5, it started zooming. Year 6 is like a rocking, right? It's been recognized as a top 20, one of the global top 20 IoT startups in the world, right? It's the only Asian IoT startup, right? There is no Israeli IoT startup by the study. And we are seeing this success, right? I think we could still wait for next 15 years to get a big exit and hope that we'll start working on that. Otherwise, we just want to start doing what it is. It's a sector which is huge opportunity. And if it's a sector where the valuations are in a very reasonable manner. So it's all investors, whether it's equity or debt, they have a chance to come at right valuation. And hopefully keep doing the right job, I think we'll get exits, right? One of the challenge I see is the talent, right? And I guess I want to understand how we are thinking, because talent is not always entrepreneurs. It's always about getting the follow the B management team or the middle management team, which no one talks about it. I think in what Shruti mentioned, what Hemendra and what Ritu mentioned, is that we're seeing a quality improvement in entrepreneurs. But are we seeing the middle management team, right? Would like to get your views on the same,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think agriculture is still on set. See, for most of the management guys, we struggle to get tier 2 management in most of the companies, and the fact of the matter is, most of the startups are in rural areas. Even if you have head offices in metros, you need to spend 15-20 days in rural areas. So it's a big challenge. I don't know how do we solve that. But at an overall level, yes, I agree, we need to change the narrative. Success stories also, I think we need to highlight a bit more, like talked about celebs. I know Cropin done a phenomenal job in the last 7 years with absolutely starting from scratch, no agriculture background now, more than 1 million farmer on his platform. I think that's a great success story. You know, they digitized more than 1 million farmers. It's not an easy task with very, very small capital.
So 2.5 by as per Friday.
Oh, it has already changed for good. So yeah, could invest in that company. So I think, yeah, those are the sort of my points. Paul, it would be good to get some your views. You are probably the first investor in the sector. Happy to hear from you.
No, I think the big approach of government policy and how inflation is curbed and how imports of commodities to check prices. My feeling is that if that continues to happen, there's no price discovery for all the agri commodities. If there's no great price discovery for agro commodities, I don't understand how profits will happen. And I think that fundamental issue is the big elephant in the room, and the government's approach and policy on really price discovery happening without interventions with imports and things like that, I think has to be reviewed. So that's one piece. I really don't think talent is as much as a challenge as we are making it out to be. I think companies like a Monsanto or a Bayer and so many other companies exist, or a TAFE for that matter, farm tools and machines. I think the real issue is investors don't understand this sector. And you guys are actually all exceptions. I don't think there's enough investor interest, and investors don't understand it as much. While people who've done healthcare and education and things like that have come from industries of a similar nature, maybe a GE or companies like that, and understand those nuances a little bit better. But it's for a different customer base, which is the base of the pyramid. I think I would think talent, more than talent, I think it's investor understanding of this segment, which they've not encountered in the IT world or the mobile world or the banking world. I think that, in my mind, is a big challenge. So that, I think, is one problem. But the other thing is government policies, which I think was not discussed yet.
So government, all I can say, most government policy that we have seen has a 5-year perspective. I don't think this sector can grow with a 5-year perspective. What Varun was talking, this digital platforms, I think there's clear need for it. But it will take years and years to build upon it. Maybe 15 years or 10 years to reach a scale that we all wish for. But which government is going to invest in that? So that's the, I don't know. That's my view on the policy perspective.
I think, Paul, it goes back to the same discussion, right? Unless you have a success story, investors are not coming in, right? We could say that we want investors, but within the constraints, we need to figure out a way to make a big success story, right? I mean, we could all crib about that AgTech is not growing. I mean, that's a fact, because we just don't have enough options, right? I mean, like Pankaj mentioned, that you will look at various other options and say what's going to be better, and you will choose what's the most optimal thing. So we need to figure out within whatever limited constraints we have to make it big, right? And I don't know, I mean, you are the only, Andreas, you are the only LP in the group right now, right? And maybe ADB, I mean, if you can tell us how we can see increased increased LP commitment to the group in the agri space, I think it would be useful to know what's your thought about this, you know. Sorry, putting you on a tough spot here.
Yeah. So the question is how people like us, or how?
Yes, how LPs look. Everything is driven by LPs. If LPs are there, GPs will go ahead and entrepreneurs will come. That's how life is.
So I think it's from my experience, we're kind of selling this in pretty tough crowds in Europe, in pretty difficult situation. We're explaining the benefits of what you guys are doing or trying to achieve. And they kind of get it, they like it, but it's very important always, and that's why I said it doesn't sell it on itself, its own merits. You may have a curve that looks like this, and still you need someone, a person, delivering it. And it helps always to to be humble, because what we're in terms of marketing this or raising funds, should always be aware. Unfortunately, this is a nice to have. This is not something investors need. You're selling something they can very well live without, probably even better, because it just adds hassle for them. Now I've got to explain this. What are we doing here? So what we're doing, we're kind of bundling it, right? So agriculture is part of financial inclusion and everything, and it's kind of a we're trying to, we don't use the term impact investing because it's so confusing nowadays. We're saying private equity in underserved markets is perhaps more, hopefully more interesting for people. And they go, yeah, we want to do more of that. Impact investing, I don't know. So, but still, what I'm hoping that we get more peers like us, AXA, PG Impact, and TIA, whatever, kind of apart from the DFIs that are taking a lead in the private sector investment into this. But I still think direct investment from Europeans into agribusiness in India is far away, to be honest. I think that is tricky, unless it's someone who really is after that. So, going after corporates like you guys are doing is easier, I think. So I don't know. I just think that you need to be something. You need to work hard. Be very. I would just go. My point was, do we need success? So the question is, what is a success story? Is it going to be Uber? I think just showing that you've gone from startup to B or C, just showing the amount of money in there is useful.
I just want to get the opinion, because everybody's mentioning this sort of lack of availability of capital after a certain stage, right? We look at the room, there are, majority of the investors are seed, incubation, Series A investors. There's not a single PE investor focused on agribusiness in the room. In the country, with my limited experience, I can recall 2 private equity firms that focus on agribusiness. So is that an LP issue? Is that a GP issue? How do you get to the B and C focused investors that are looking at the sector, in your opinion?
So there are a bunch of PE investors that will look at food and agribusiness, and yes, they are not in the room, and they should be in the room, but it's an impact conference, and they don't want to define themselves quite that way. But they've also all invested in very traditional businesses that are fairly capital intensive, so there's a much longer capital, much more capital needed before you can get to those kind of numbers. They haven't necessarily invested in the new age tech kind of stuff. And that interest will come from a different segment, and some Ps who may say, okay, I better start looking over here, right? But there still is a gap between that and a Series A investment.
I think the likelier bet would be the sector agnostic Series B, Series C guys who start to see the financial opportunity in this space. So those are the ones that we probably need to engage more closely with.
Guys, we have last 5 minutes to talk. Is anyone not spoken and want to make the point? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jayant from Seekers Finance. We are a debt investment in clean energy. We have started looking at investments into energy agri-linkage. Reason we are trying to do that is when you're looking at some of the interventions, they are basic, non-energy linked, they're around etc. But we see a lot of mechanization or say refrigeration stuff related to initiatives which do have an energy offspring. So we're looking at some of those, which is one of them.
We, along with Hemendra here and a couple of other folks from the agri industry, started a platform called ThinkAg. And the idea behind the platform was to pull in all agri stakeholders, corporates, banks, etc. They're all taking there. So that how do you drive scale much faster? So I just urge all of you guys, since you have an interest in agri, to take a look and see whether it would make sense for you guys to be part of this platform. It's called ThinkAg, www.thinkag.in.
Sure, would like to then sum it up, right? I think we spoke about quite a few things about data's challenge, success, absence of success stories, talent issue, trust, and absence of trust with the farmer, and the price discovery. But I think the most important thing what I realize is that it's a change in narrative. It's instead of being pessimistic about what
we as a sector have a problem. It's important to start being positive and tell that things have huge potential, and I think if we want to become positive, I think we will see a lot of positivity coming out and a lot of money will come in the sector, right? I mean, that's how it's happened, right? I mean, venture investment in India started in 2000, the early part of the 20th century, 21st century. And everything was looking bad. India was falling apart. Y2K boom was, I mean, the dot-com burst was happening. But VC started investing in that frame, and the guys who came on the early days probably have made it very, very big. I think it's important for our agri investors continue to start talking that.
See the last.
Yeah, just quickly, when we were asked to set up a capital fund for a DFI, the first question is then find out what is the market demand. So I contacted all my friends and nobody could tell me what is the market demand, whether it's for VC, debt or quasi-equity for this sector. So there's an absence of knowledge, and then when you break into subsectors, the knowledge gap becomes more. The second point is that let's forget about the past. Everybody says there's a huge demand, we are the most inefficient in agri, there's a huge wastage, we have a huge land bank, and we need efficiencies, technology is absent. But if you see the scenario now, we have close to 200 incubators, and they are getting about approximately 20 lakhs per unit in that incubator for the incubating. Now that's a big change. And then even if you take out 5 to 10% of agri sector projects coming in, the base is getting established, as he gave an example. That's the first change in the present scenario. The second change is that you have a lot of these awards in the space, and a lot of them are going into the agri sector. Now, in India, the SME or the startup always starts either with its own money or with the awards or in an incubator, or you have now the grants. The number of institutions which are giving grants. The next change is that all the R&D and agri institutions are set up incubators. So you have that mentoring which is being taken care of. Now, once the base gets established, there's normally a 3-4 year gap before you start getting the success stories and Series A comes in. So that's, I think, the change one needs to see if you're setting up a dedicated fund or a general fund. The other change is in the quality of entrepreneurs that everybody has said, and then the fund of funds activity, whether it's SIDBI, whether it's BIRAC, they've all started putting an X amount in a fund, provided you use 2X for this agri or food activity. Now that's another change. So once you have this whole change in the ecosystem, I think the sector would develop, and then will come the success story. And once the success stories comes, the overseas funding comes in and it accelerates the whole process.
Thank you, Mr. Rewari. That's a very positive note to end the session. Thank you very much. I think collectively, if we can change the narrative, as Shruti said, I think we're definitely one step closer to make the sector more attractive for the investors. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening.